Folks, welcome back to Flatirons Tuning. We are here today with a special edition of the SubaNews. This is for the 29th week of 2026. We are going to talk about Subaru returning to the WRC. There's a lot of signs circling. It seems like there's a good chance of this happening, but we want to delve into why would Subaru be considering returning to the WRC now or in 2027? What would it look like? You know, from everything that we know, from everything that we've seen, what is the highest likelihood of what Subaru would do to return to the WRC? And we have to talk about, are there some potential downsides or negatives if Subaru would return to the WRC? Before we do that, I just want to say make sure you like, subscribe, hit the hype button. It helps us out a ton to help get this word out so we can keep making these videos for you. Let's start at the top. Why now? Why might Subaru be looking at returning to the WRC for the 2027 season? First and foremost, it's because of the change in regulations that has opened up the engine requirements basically to just be as simple as a 4-cylinder 1.6-liter engine. That's it. One of the biggest pushes that got Subaru out of the WRC back in 2009 was the fact that they were locked from running a boxer engine. So they would have had to have gone to an inline engine at that time. Then the prior, or I guess 2 regulations ago, that the Rally 1 cars, it's basically a very prescribed hybrid drivetrain with a very bespoke inline-4 engine. The rules basically dictated the kind of transmission that you could run. It really became more of a driver's championship than a constructor's championship because of how many similarities there were to the cars. Not to mention that everything kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and Subaru didn't really have any cars that were the same size platform, and so that's where they just didn't have a car that would be competitive. They weren't able to run their engine, and basically from what it seems like, they just never really considered going back to the WRC from that point. Well, a lot of that has changed with the WRC 27 rules. The other big development that's happened is that the top rally class now here in the United States in the ARA Rally is Rally 2. And they've basically standardized that top class with the Rally 2 rule set of the FIA in the WRC. So there are now Rally 2 cars that are coming over from Europe and running here in the United States at the top class of the ARA. Effectively now there's overlap, whereas before, and really up until just about 2 years ago, the ARA rules were very, very different from the FIA rules for the WRC, but now it's basically the same rule set. If Subaru, say, would develop a car right now, a Rally 2 car, they could run it over here in the top class of the ARA. They could run it in the Rally 2 class of the WRC for WRC 27 going on. It makes a lot of sense. So the development cost kind of would be split between those 2 programs in theory. And it would also basically let Subaru go back up to the top class in the ARA, which they have now pulled away from because right now they're only competing in the limited 4-wheel drive class here in the United States for this year, 2026, which might be alluding to the fact that they're making some plans to make room for a new car, a new chassis.
There is new emphasis on performance for the Subaru brand. There's new emphasis back on developing a new ICE engine. So I'm super excited. They mentioned on a global stage the passion for the brand in the United States. Speechless. I mean, we got that.
But there's 2 other things that we have to factor in here too. One is that there's also talk, and it seems like it's increasingly likely each year that goes by, that the US is going to get a WRC race again. There's a lot of talk about something getting put together in Tennessee. A lot of the test events that have been run in Tennessee has been to try and like build up the experience and the skill set and kind of a proof of concept for a WRC race. If we get a WRC race here in the US, that could be huge, and that could be a big motivator for Subaru to want to be present there. Well, they need a car to run. If they're able to compete in the home race in the US, in the WRC over in Europe, and in a lot of their other big markets, that makes a lot of sense there too. And again, here the US is a lion's share. It is the biggest Subaru market in the world by far. I think we're 70% of Subaru's sales. That's another reason to get back into rally. There's been a big resurgence in interest in rally, and there's going to be a WRC rally here in the US as well. It would almost be crazy for Subaru to not be present. So there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that make sense for Subaru to get back into rally in 2027. The last detail that is a really interesting one is that the other thing is now the difference between Rally 2 and Rally 1, or the top tier class, they're calling it WRC 27, at least for the 2 years of 27 and 28, it's literally can be as simple as down to an aero package. The engine, the drivetrain, and all of those requirements basically the same between Rally 2 and what they're calling WRC 27. So if Subaru just wanted to get into the Rally 2 class in 2027 and then work up to going to the top class, they could do exactly that with one chassis that's running both here in the ARA and in the WRC. They'd be able to run the same R2 car in WRC 27, the top class in the WRC. But here's the caveat, is that that's only for the 2 years, 27 and 28, and then by the end of that, then it's pretty much, even if you're using a production-based chassis, you would have to go over to a tube chassis, and it sounds like that top class, the WRC 27 class, is going to be slightly different, and they'd have to develop a more proper chassis, probably a lighter chassis, for 2029 and going forward. But if Subaru's happy to be in Rally 2, they wouldn't have to do any of that, and there's a lot of reasons I think that it would make the most sense for them to just stay in Rally 2. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to Flat Irons Tuning. We're here in the shop, We're here today at our top secret test track at the Boost Creek at High Plains Raceway. From 2026 Pikes Peak. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you guys at home, this helps answer some of your questions. Stay tuned with Flat Irons Tuning. There's all of the arguments that we can think of as far as why now would be the right time for Subaru to come back into the WRC, and just a lot of the pieces of the puzzle would fit. What would it look like? What it comes down to is, would they be looking at the BRZ chassis or an Impreza chassis if they were going to get back into the WRC? Now, basically everything that we've seen with this Boxer Rally Spec Z, the all-wheel drive BRZ that Toshi Arai has been competing with in the All Japan Rally Series this year, that is the biggest hint that the Subaru must be really thinking hard about getting back into the WRC. Why is that? Well, because Toyota, and I believe as we're recording this, Toyota is the only manufacturer that is committed to running in the top class in the WRC for the 27 rule set and on. Well, they're developing a new chassis for the 27 year, and it's called, well, I guess everybody's calling it the Celica. They haven't officially called it the Celica, but this is like when the news first broke, and the render of this BR Spec Z popped up, it looked identical to the Toyota to the car that Toyota is testing and saying, you know, they're testing this for the 27 season. They're testing this for the WRC 27 season with, you know, Oliver Solberg. Their drivers are testing this car that looks identical to the all-wheel drive BRZ car. See, the similarities there, it cannot be a coincidence, you wouldn't think. And of course, the chassis is co-developed between Toyota and Subaru. Now, the biggest difference is that the BRZ, the all-wheel drive BRZ that we've seen, is definitely based on a BRZ chassis. It is a production car, is a production chassis that they're modifying to make it all-wheel drive and be able to compete, or all-wheel drive and rally car and so forth. Whereas the Toyota Test Mule is 100% a tube chassis car. Like you can tell with some of the shots and everything on it, it is definitely a tube chassis car. So that is definitely a WRC 27 car, whereas, you know, what Subaru is running would be maybe a Rally 2 car. Also, the engine is different. It's a turbocharged 2.4 liter, so they'd have to put a 1.6 liter engine in the BRZ. It does fit because it is lighter and it is smaller than the Impreza chassis, even currently, and so then that makes it a better fit to be more competitive in that class. That's one of the big questions, because if they make the BRZ the rally car, if they go to the WRC with the BRZ, wow, what does that mean? Because we have again this rumor that the STI is coming back. We really think and we really hope that the STI is coming back, but basically in this hatchback form that we've seen the Performance B concept, we think that that's going to be the STI. Everything points to that being the STI. That does not fit with what we're seeing as far as the car that Toyota is testing. And again, it might be a little bit too big to be competitive with some of these, you know, smaller, lighter chassis. So that's a question mark. But then Subaru announced this, or has trademarked the Impreza TX, which we're speculating is a turbo all-wheel drive Impreza chassis, which would be, you know, basically an entry-level Impreza here. But if this has a turbo engine, that could be the 1.6 liter engine that Subaru needs to be able to compete in the WRC, or to basically homologate. Could it be something where the 1.6 liter turbo engine appears here in the Impreza, but they put it in the BRZ chassis, and that's what they run in the WRC and in the top class of ARA? It certainly could be. Is it possible that they're going to come out with basically a facelift or an update of the Impreza chassis here to basically give it the same wheelbase and footprint as the BRZ, so that could then be the chassis that they run in the WRC? So something based on this Impreza hatchback. If that's the case, keep in mind here that the footprint of the Impreza versus the BRZ is actually very close. The BRZ is just 4 inches shorter in wheelbase compared to the Impreza, so it could certainly be done with a relatively minor floor plan change to get the Impreza hatchback to be more or less the footprint that it would need to be to fit in the WRC rule set. And if it already had the 1.6 liter engine, then it would all fit together really nicely and neatly, but then why would they spend all of this energy developing an all-wheel drive BRZ rally car? So it's really hard to say which one is more likely here. I guess the last piece that kind of tips it back towards the Impreza, as far as that being the chassis that they would run, is if they're going to come out with this STI version of the Impreza, which is basically what it appears to be that the Performance B concept is, with basically a wide body kit on an Impreza hatch for the STI. Why wouldn't you not make that STI version on the same car that you're running in the WRC? So you're getting all of the promotional and advertising value out of the WRC car, the ARA car for the Impreza versus the BRZ, which Subaru could build the BRZ up, but there's a lot of X factors there. It's not as clear of a path. It doesn't make as much sense if they were going to do that, unless they completely rework and rethink what the BRZ is that we as customers can get, which I think that there's some big positives to that as well. That then brings us to the final point. Are there any downsides if Subaru goes back into the WRC? I think that there are a couple, and the biggest one here has to do around, one, how much Subaru has gotten into road racing and how much success they've had in road racing, and basically their development path, especially for what is likely to be this next STI, also with road racing, but with their Super Tycoon car. Think back here basically to when Subaru got really involved in Super GT, which was 2009. And basically the timeline lines up so that basically when they pulled out of the WRC the very next year, they put all of this energy into their Super GT campaign. This is where the BRZ GT300 came from. The second version of that has come from, and now the 6-cylinder twin turbo version of the BRZ. All of that has come from that effort. The biggest question in my mind is if they go back to the WRC, what happens to the road racing focus? Does that mean that basically the BRZ GT300 and the Super GT effort would be downsized, or possibly they would not have a budget to do what they did this year with the 6-cylinder twin turbo engine? Because that must have been very expensive to develop. Would development like that just be completely gone and off the table? The testing that they're doing with the Super Tycoon car, I cannot remember any time ever where Subaru has put this much time and testing into a platform to prove its capability as with the Super Tycoon car. And if that becomes the STI, what that should all amount to a large degree, is that this next STI should be the best STI ever by a long, long way. And if it does, it will largely be because of all of the development that they've put into testing that car on track and so forth. And by going on track and testing these cars, they're basically building and vetting these chassis for the use case that the majority of us are going to use them for. Now, yes, Subaru has a long and successful history in rally. Now, they've been, a participant in rally for many, many decades at this point. I mean, going back to, was it 92, 91? But the majority of people that are using Subarus as track cars, it is on track. It is in, club events, track days, grid life, time attack. Heck, the BRZ is very popular in some open wheel classes. There is the Toyota GR86 Cup, for instance. So there's a much greater number of enthusiasts that are using Subarus on track than people that are building Subarus into rally cars. So I really think that the track use is a much bigger market, and it's also a much broader market compared to rally. You guys know I'm adamant that I really think Subaru should develop like a GT4 car or a GT3 car of the BRZ with this 6-cylinder or 6-cylinder twin turbo engine, because I think there's a huge amount of potential there, and there's a gap in the market that it would really land in and work well in. And I think if Subaru is to develop that car for that market, it would take them to a whole nother level, and what they would learn and be able to apply with that BRZ GT4 car, let's say, would be massive. And then if any of that translates down into any of the other cars, this would be a huge step forward for enthusiasts from Subaru. But that car invariably is going to be much, much more expensive. We're probably talking about an $80,000 to $100,000 car, possibly even more than $100,000, especially if it's a GT3 car. So there's some real pluses there, but I think some real negatives, because I think the sales volume is going to be probably pretty low. The big advantage in them getting back into the WRC and running a rally car is that the cars that these are built of, especially if you have a 1.6 liter Impreza TX, and that's the entry-level Impreza, and then the STI, which is going to have probably this 2.4 liter and more power, both of those are going to be more attainable to most of us compared to a GT4 or a GT3 BRZ. It almost feels like it could be as much of a step back as it is a step forward for Subaru, because the development is going to go more towards rally, which is a much smaller use case for most Subaru enthusiasts compared to diving into road race to a full extent. Because again, like everything that we're seeing from the Super Taika car is that it's going to be very capable, very reliable, and very fast. Just checks a lot of boxes for people to want to track their Subarus. It is a bit of a toss-up. I'd be curious to see what you think in the comments if you think big picture, long term, like say the next 5-6 years, if it would be better for Subaru to have a GT4, GT3 car and really have a track proven and tested STI that would be really capable for club track days, time attack, you name it, versus going all in back into rally and kind of having the WRX and the STI be what they were for a long time, which is nothing wrong with that. But again, to me, that kind of feels like a step back instead of a step forward. So let me know what you think about there. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. That's what we are looking at. What are the key signs that we're looking at? One would be if the Impreza TX is announced with a 1.6 liter turbocharged engine. That is a huge sign, and especially if something for the 28 BRZ gets announced, because they've already announced the 27 BRZ, so that's there. But if they announce a 28 BRZ with a 1.6 liter turbo engine, that would also be a big tip of this, that they're going back to the WRC. Though if they announce both of those things, maybe they run both of them. I don't know. The other thing is an announcement about the STI. If Subaru comes out with an announcement of the STI, I don't think it's going to get a 1.6 liter engine for obvious reasons, but if the STI comes back and we look at it and see what the build is, what are the specs, what's the transmission, is this more of a rally car or is this more of a track car? But those are the signs that we're waiting for from Subaru. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What are you waiting to see from Subaru to tell whether they're thinking of going back into rally or going back into road racing? That's what we've been able to put together here so far. So yeah, all we got to do now is just sit back and wait. And Subaru, you gotta kind of give us a hint or reveal something or confirm something for 2027, and then we'll kind of know more about what you guys have in mind. And boy, I'm really excited to see what it is. I'm just crossing my fingers that it's going to be good, and we're not going to have to wait too long to find out. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flat Irons Tuning.